You know, I love this piece of trivia, because I think when it happened, a lot of us weren't really all too surprised, but when you compare this situation to everything that happened afterwards in the NHL, the way certain awards were handed out, what kinds of players would win these awards, and just what exactly Taylor Hall's Hart Trophy victory looks like, it's always a little bit of a shock. Hey, a guy won the Hart Trophy while only scoring 93 points in a year? How? Why? What went into that process? He was a first overall pick that had a pretty okay career with the Oilers, but he was never as good as Connor McDavid was, so he took his talents over to New Jersey. He willed that team into the playoffs in 2017-18. He won the MVP trophy, and as a result, his name has kind of gone down in infamy because he didn't score as many points as other Hart winners had scored. Never mind that, but Taylor Hall eventually had himself a pretty weird career because he had some good years producing points. He had some injured years where he scored quite a few points but didn't have that many games played. He bounced around from team to team to team. Ever since winning the Hart Trophy in 2017-18, he went from New Jersey to Arizona to Buffalo to Boston to Chicago, and now, as a member of the Blackhawks, he had 10 games played last season, only scored 4 points, was injured for the majority of the year. This season, he's back, he's better than ever, he's got 6 points in 14 games, which admittedly is a point production pace that's a lot lower than what he had accomplished with the Boston Bruins. He is on pace for 35 points, but you also have the argument that says that the Chicago Blackhawks are just that bad of a team. I mean, look, I've been kind of popping in and out here of the Chicago Blackhawks hype train, getting guys like Connor Bedard and Ryan Donato on my fantasy team. It's been a pretty rough ride this season. But for Taylor Hall, you can say that he is a part of that rough group of players that has not really been able to put everything together, mostly because of the talent around him. I think most can agree that Taylor Hall is a good hockey player, as exemplified by his 3 points in his most previous 4 games played. But for Taylor Hall, in his situation, his contract is expiring at the end of the year. He's making $6 million. He's 32 years old, and at this point throughout his career, we are talking once again about the idea of a Taylor Hall trade. And there are 2 teams in particular that I wanted to dive into that make sense. Firstly, let's go over to an article published on Buffalo Hockey Now by Jason Moser that talks about how a former Sabres forward should be on Kevyn Adams' trade radar. Of course, you know from the title, we're talking about Taylor Hall. I'll leave a link in the description to this article as well as another article, but to read the Buffalo Sabres one first and foremost, you've heard the supposed Einstein quote before. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Therefore, trading for a former key player who donned a Sabres uniform during the last place season is insane. Right? Not if that trade is for former Sabres forward Taylor Hall, whose impact on Buffalo during an odd season was well understated. In case you missed it, Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet reported last week that Buffalo Sabres GM Kevyn Adams was among the more active GMs in the league thus far. Friedman said that Adams is making it clear around the NHL that he is looking to add, and not subtract, from the current Sabres roster. The obvious target is a top 6 forward, which was a need over the offseason that wasn't addressed. The heightened urgency to find one comes with the slow starts to the season from second-line staples Dylan Cozens and Jack Quinn. Ideally, a left winger complementing their skills could help the duo not only get back on track, but also become one of the better second lines in the league. And yes, this is an idea that has been floating around the Buffalo Sabres bubble for a while now, that they could be in the mix for a forward, they could be in a spot to get some extra support, because Cozens and Quinn haven't necessarily been the best this season. I mean, Cozens has 4 points in 13 games and Jack Quinn has only 2 in 12 games. Not great. They're getting some great production out of the guys at the top of the lineup. Jason Zucker has been a powerhouse, not to mention Alex Tuch, Tage Thompson, and JJ Peterka. And you also have the defensemen chipping in too with Darlene Power and Byram. But you need that second line to start getting things going. So for Taylor Hall, this is where the idea is brought up in the article. Hall is in the last year of his deal, yada yada yada. He can somewhat dictate where he wants to go should a trade arise with a modified 10-team no-trade clause. It's always possible the Sabres are on that list, but it's important to remember that Adams and the organization did right by him by sending him to a preferred destination in Boston in 2021. The the prorated $6 million cap hit would fit within the Sabres' salary cap constraints, as the team has $7.3 million in space. The article then talks about how Taylor Hall with Buffalo is different from what Taylor Hall is right now with Chicago, how he was brought in to be this presence for Connor Bedard to rely upon, and he's been shooting at a lower percentage, but you could definitely say that he could get better in that respect. And whether or not there could be some sort of a trade, I don't know. Whether Adams wants to dip back into the Hall well, the Sabres will have to find someone like him soon if they want to give themselves the best chance of making the playoffs this season. Hall brings the talent, experience, and perhaps a little bit of that "it's so crazy it might work" kind of insanity to a Sabres trade that can get them there. Now, I also wanted to talk about yet another team that could be interested in Taylor Hall. We're going over to another article, this time on New Jersey Hockey Now, because this article by James Nichols describes Hall as a potential Devils target once again. And the reason I think this is crazy is because Taylor Hall also was a former New Jersey Devil. He won the Hart Trophy with this team. In fact, this daily article just kind of talks about how the Buffalo folks wrote about Hall, but they also said here, hey, we have advocated before for a potential Devils reunion with Hall. Is there some sort of a world that sees him going over back to the Devils, the team wherein he was the MVP, the most valuable player in the league, as described by the voters? I'm gonna be honest here, I don't really think the Devils have that much of a need for a guy like Taylor Hall. I mean, they have been so good this season. You can say that a lot of their point production is skewed by the fact that they had so many extra games to start out the year in Europe, but Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, these guys have been producing like crazy. Jesper Bratt has been very good. Jack Hughes is Jack Hughes. And you have other guys, too, that are also producing at an insane rate. Paul Cotter is getting goals. Stefan Nason, I think, was a point per game at some point earlier in the year. This team doesn't really need Taylor Hall. But if they did get him, obviously, he would be an addition that's better than, let's say, a guy like Curtis McDermott, for example, who's playing forward right now. And with a New Jersey team that is already in a pretty big kind of limbo territory with Simon Nemec on defense, you can already understand just how good they've been to start out this season. They are literally tied for first in the Metro, although they have a significant games played disadvantage because of those extra games at the beginning of the year. I don't know if there would be the same sort of necessity for a guy like Hall in New Jersey. Buffalo certainly seems to be a position that could use him more, and they could actually get more value out of him. And I also do think that Buffalo would have better assets to trade Chicago if they were to ask for some sort of a trade to get through. I also do think that Buffalo is worse than New Jersey, so you could debate that their draft picks could be seen as more valuable, even if they're confined within the same round, but it ultimately boils down to what the Hawks would want and where Taylor Hall would want to go. He is in some partial control of his destination. If he doesn't want to go to Buffalo because, they might not be in a spot to contend anytime soon, yada yada yada, hey, guess what? New Jersey is. So you could just send yourself away over to New Jersey and give a lot of leverage to them, therefore making the price and the trade return maybe not all too great, but still, there are options here for Taylor Hall, the Blackhawks, and these teams that are going to be asking for the player here. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Blackhawks fan, what is it from Buffalo and or New Jersey that you would want in exchange for Taylor Hall? What kind of guy do you think makes this trade go through? What kind of prospect? What kind of pick? If you're a fan of the Sabres, if you're a fan of the Devils, what kind of prospects in your system do you think would be appropriate to send over in a Chicago Blackhawks Hall deal? What kind of assets would you be willing to trade away? Obviously, for New Jersey, you could infer that draft picks are probably likely on the table. They don't really need to use those anymore. They've got a competitive team now and a lot of good firepower up front that is young. A lot of good defensemen that are young. Some of them not really all too utilized anyway, so you could say maybe you have a surplus of young talent. Who really knows? Buffalo, New Jersey, what are your thoughts on this entire idea? Taylor Hall, yay or nay, would you want to bring back a former superstar to your teams? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.